Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops. Could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. So, summer's officially here, I think, folks. I think we have the 4th of July weekend coming up. Happy 4th of July to all listeners out there. Hope you all get to spend the holiday with friends, family, a beverage. Careful around those fuses and fires. We here at Screen the Screener will attempt to provide you your college hoops and basketball fix during this holiday week and weekend. NBA free agency hit big this past weekend with loads of movement by some of the biggest stars in the sport and tons of dollars being thrown around. $3 billion or more, to be exact, just about by every team in the league. So we're going to give you our 2 cents on some of the moves. We're going to attempt to project who might mimic or parallel some of the NBA success from this past NBA draft and who might fit the profile that is still existing in the current college game. First, we need to chat about this Knick sense that we coined, this term last offseason due to the blunders of our beloved Knick team, the once great Knick team here in the metropolitan area. Why? Why on earth? Why on earth, if you're the Knicks, would you come out and say you're unprepared or not prepared for anything during free agency? I know they use the term not prepared or unprepared with the offer to a multi-time NBA Finals MVP, one of the top 3 or 4 players in the league. They're not prepared to do something with that player due to injury? Awful on multiple fronts. Admitting you're unprepared after clearing cap room is just a terrible look. It's a terrible look for players that you want to bring in. It's a terrible look for other teams in the league. It's a terrible look for your pro. This is the same team that gave Amari Stoudemire a max contract with the knowledge that he might not make it through the life of that max contract and still signed him to that max contract. Now, they did get one all-NBA year out of him, which was like a top 5 MVP type year, and he was bananas and absolutely fantastic. They also got another all-star year out of the Amari tenure. But then if you're going to do the same thing there, and then looking at KD's current injury plight, commenting publicly on this issue is just a terrible look for the organization, the medical staff, and the front office. Awful, awful, awful. Then throw in the fact that KD goes and signs one river away in Brooklyn, and now it just looks even sillier. And then throw in the settle signings that are Julius Randle, that are Bobby Portis, that is Wayne Ellington. All of these signings are just the same type of contracts that they have tried to shed the past 2 or 3 years to get to the point that they are at now. Now, Knicks, they just can't get out of their own way. Now they're going to be stuck with the signings for the next 2 years of the type of players that they just tried to get rid of. More slightly overvalued Tim Hardaway Jr. type contracts to come. Oh, Knicks sense. So let's start there with the Knicks and the signing of Julius Randle, who we kind of like, who might be in line for some big money. And we want to just figure out, who from this particular draft might be in line for that type of money due to their similarities and skill set and style of play. 2 rookies. One of our favorites is Rui. I think Rui getting taken by the Wizards is one of those players that could fit that mold. He did everything that you want from a lottery pick, and we talked about a little bit him, previously leading up to the draft. Does his shooting project? Yeah, 75% at the free throw stripe. He averaged over 20 points a game. He posted college career highs in assists, blocks, steals, and a team that was ranked number 1 during the season and made an Elite 8 run. A deeper dip into Hachimura metrics speak to his further efficiency. The combo forward had a true shooting percentage of 64%. And his PER topped out at 27. And we know that Brandon Clark is like the PER darling from Gonzaga, but I'm telling you, Rui was not far behind as far as a metric darling. And I think that the thing is, who does Hachimura guard? And I think we asked the same thing of Randle, to be honest. And I think we also have to say, is he quick enough to play the 3? Is he strong enough to play the 4? I don't think that really matters. I think film tells us that he can guard in space a little bit. And I think the situation with him as a grab-and-go 4 that can possibly space the floor makes perfect sense. And if we're just going to go, look at the massive success that Domantas Sabonis has had with Indiana, if we're going to take a peek at the impact that Zach Collins had for Portland in their playoff run to the conference finals against the Warriors this past year, it's not like Gonzaga players don't know how to play basketball. It's not like they don't know how to fit into a team construct. And I think the last thing for Hachimura is that he might have a few bigger things on the horizon. And this is just like a very personal podcast thing. Japan is going to have the Summer Olympics in a couple of years, and I'm assuming that Hachimura is going to play for Japan. And he just might be the first basketball player to hold the Olympic flag for Japan during that opening ceremony. And he's the first Japan-born player as an NBA draft pick. I think if we're looking for somebody that might be iconic, it could be Rui if his skill set translates to success on the basketball floor. So I think that's one player that we could liken to the Julius Randle type model. And I think another one is just across the river, and this is crazy, but we're going to go with Nick Claxton. I really like him as a player, and I think the pick here of Claxton now makes perfect sense now that they have Durant in the fold. They're probably going to put Claxton in a whole bunch of the positions that they're going to put Durant in alongside Kyrie Irving and the rest of the talented wing players they have, LeVert and Dinwiddie and all of those players and Radis Krokus that they drafted last year. That's going to make sense. Now, I think that Claxton owns some offensive initiation components that are really interesting. He's an unbelievable beast on the defensive end. It's not like he's going to get shorted there. So I think he might actually fit into the NBA construct perfectly. And I think his assist rate and his underrated ball handling are really going to be assets, much like Randall's ball handling, and his expanded offensive game has taken shape. And we saw what he did without AD with the Pelicans. He kind of blew up and averaged 20 and 10. I can see Nick Claxton getting to a similar type opportunity. Now, it's going to be crowded on the Nets, don't get me wrong, but I think that his profile and his skill set does fit similarly to what Randall said. So if we're looking for two guys that just got drafted, let's look at Rui and the Wizards, and let's look at Claxton with the Nets right across the river. And if we're going to look at a college name that might hold a similar profile or likens to Randall's game, let's just look at Charles Bassey. He's going to come back at Western Kentucky. He's a legit load, 6'11", 245. The true freshman averaged a double-double. Last year, inside Conference USA, registering 14.6 points and 10 boards. Even a keener look at his metrics. He had a PER that went over 25, so we're talking Rui category there inside of Conference USA. I know that's skewed a little bit. He had a box plus-minus that led the league. At the defensive end, he held strong notes. He averaged over 2 blocks a game and almost a steal a game, so his value as a rim protector and a deterrent on the defensive end is real. He even hit 9 threes during the year, so I expect an uptick in that number if he is returning for a sophomore season as a Hilltopper. I think that if we're looking for a player this season to kind of have a blow-up season and maybe expand his offensive game the way that Julius Randle has, parlayed that into a $60 million contract in the NBA, it might be Charles Bassey at Western Kentucky. Look, another player that got max money to stay put in Philly is Tobias Harris. $180 million. 180 million reasons to remain a 76er. So let's take a look at who might fit that bill out of the last draft. I think it has to be Cam Reddish for the Hawks. Right? Cam has legit NBA size and frame, 6'8"-ish, 215-ish. He's got shot-making ability from all over the floor. Now, Zion and RJ held the ESPN highlights and some crazy banana numbers and stats. We saw Zion's PER number through the roof and above Clark and was at a legendary all-time level. And RJ, when Zion was out, put up absolutely bananas traditional stats. And Reddish just kind of got pushed to the side. Now, he does own his Florida State game-winning three-pointer at the buzzer to display his big shot equity, along with playing with lead guard Trae Young and NBA big John Collins and lob catcher extraordinaire and other floor spacers. Reddish might actually get to fill his true role here as a secondary offensive creator on the wing alongside Trae Young and not just be a spot-up shooter and release valve offensive player, which was his role at Duke. This pick might end up being really valuable on the wing in the current NBA, and this might be the wing pick that current NBA teams have been searching for the past couple of drafts and really highly valued. So if we're going to look for who's going to be the next Tobias Harris that's going to garner $180 million from the past draft, Cam Reddish, Hawks, has to fill that role. And if we're going to look at a couple guys that are still in the college game that might hit that $180 million ceiling, which is absolutely bananas. How about Isaiah Joe from Arkansas? Kid can shoot it, and he'll be asked to do exactly that. Coach Musselman coming in from Nevada. We witnessed the freedom that Caleb Martin was allowed to run with inside that low turnover Wolfpack offense. Expect a giant uptick in attempts and makes from three from Joe this season. And many of those attempts will definitely be coming from NBA range because we remember Caleb's shot chart. I mean, he jacked a bunch of those from well beyond the college three-point line. He's going to warp SEC defenses in the process. Now, can Joe expand his dribble drive game with that space that's going to exist in the offense? That's why we watch. That's what we want to see development in his game. And that's why we want to see, guys like Bassie, guys like Joe, guys like the name we're going to mention next in Jordan Noir from Louisville. That's why we watch, because we want to see the expansion in these guys' games and the advancement and the work that they've put in. He just might have a Malik Monk type year and light up some teams from three and place big, huge numbers that defenses are going to need to account for next season. And, if we're going to go Noir from Louisville, one of the players that everybody can comfortably put on a preseason All-America team, right, whether it's first, second, or third team. I mean, you could probably throw Cassius Winston and Marcus Howard in that conversation as well. But Noir is just the type of player who can dominate college hoops this upcoming season. Think back to how Travion Blewett's run with Coach Mack at Xavier. Blewett got that Xavier team to an Elite Eight with a win away from the Final Four against that great Gonzaga team that went to the championship game. And then, Xavier just won the Big East regular season outright over Villanova and grabbed the number 1 seed in March during his senior season. So it's not like, Coach Mack is not going to put him in successful situations. Nora owns an NBA frame for a wing. He can score the ball. It's inside the tough ACC. 17 points a game, 38% from three. Nora also rebounds really well for his position, and he rebounds in space really well. He just might have a Caleb Martin type year, something that resembles Trayvon Blewett's junior or senior year from Xavier in the Big East, and he might just blow up and be that next player that's really valued in the NBA that garners that $180 million contract. Listen, another player that we really love in the NBA that got a big money deal is Malcolm Brogdon. One of our darlings from the Bucks. He switched teams. He's now a Pacer, and he has a new $85 million deal. Man, I think the Bucks had a number in their head, and that number, this $85 million deal just went right above that number. And Brogdon, was in some unbelievable rare air where he shot it 50% from the field, 40% from three, and 90% from the line. And the list of players that have done that, we're talking Steve Nash, Steph Curry, Reggie Miller. We're talking very select company. Okay. Now, who might fill that role in this past draft? That might be a second rounder. I'm not saying either one of these guys are going to be rookie of the year like Brogdon was, but that's going to be really valued on their team and find success. How about Taylor Horton-Tucker, THT, from the Lakers? Second round pick with a really intriguing NBA profile. He's not dissimilar from Brogdon. His ball handling, his wingspan, his girth create unique cross-section of skills that really fit the modern NBA wing. If THT can shoot it a little bit more efficiently from deep, he was only 30% during his lone year at Iowa State, then we're talking about a true asset that's hiding on the Lakers roster and somebody that LeBron and AD will really appreciate due to his switchability and his defensive prowess if he can just bring a little bit more on the offense, especially stretching the floor and creating space for those two superstars. And the other guy is just a podcast favorite. It's Cody Martin. Got drafted by the Hornets. He's a longtime podcast favorite. So pleased to hear his name called in June during the NBA draft. Cody does so much on both sides of the ball to influence winning. He was a defensive player in the Mountain West 2 years back, and he can guard 1 through almost 4 with his craftiness, length, and smarts. His ball handling holds similar value to, say, like Sean Livingston of the Warriors or maybe Marcus Smart of the Celtics, where he can run the offense multiple times down the floor and even initiate offense as a wing, as an ancillary wing. And much like THT, Cody can shoot it a little bit from deep, and his NBA value is well worth an early second-round selection thanks to his diverse skill set and size. And I think that Cody is really going to find success, and he's going to have a longer NBA career than maybe people think because of that cross-section of skills. And if we're going to go to one player in the college game that could fit that role, that maybe surprises and pops, and I'm just going to go with Jalen Pickett. I mean, I know we talked about the freshman from Siena. He's one of our favorite returning lead guards in college hoops. The Frosh did everything for the Saints. He led the MAC in assists. He was a terror on D. He probed the lane for offensive opportunities at all 3 scoring levels, at the rim, in the mid-range game where he really excelled, and at the three-point line. And yes, he shot and made a lot of what would be labeled like poor twos or bad decision twos in the current NBA construct, but he owns legit size for a lead guard at 6'4", You need more? Just pull up the under the radar game right around Valentine's Day from this past season where Pickett was matched up against Quinnipiac's Cam Young. Both of those guys went off. Cam had over 50 points in the game, and Pickett put up 46 points, hit 4 threes. He handed out 13 assists. He had 4 steals. That's filthy for any league. I don't care if it's the MAAC, the MAAC. It doesn't matter. Pickett is legit. He is for real. Know the name, folks. He could be another Ja Morant type situation that a sophomore guard returns and blows up college hoops from a mid-major level with numbers that are just bananas. Pickett has that opportunity and that capability. Keep an eye on him. And finally, I think let's just hit the rewind button from a couple years ago. I know I remembered watching this like on the crawl, because we were constantly watching like during NBA free agency, like who signed for what amount of money. And then you make your own like judgment on like, oh man, that's a good deal. Oh man, that's a bad deal. Oh, it's a surprising deal. I just still remember when Ryan Anderson signed a 4-year, $80 million deal with the Rockets. And I was like, really? Okay. And that really spoke to the change in the landscape of the game and kind of the forward thinking that Daryl Morey and the Rockets have as far as floor spacing around your dynamic lead creator, which is, the Beard, trying to put floor spacers around him and how much they valued floor spacers. So like Ryan Anderson, 4 years, $80 million. Who would have thought that coming into his rookie year, right? That's crazy. Good for that guy. So who might be the next like Ryan Anderson from this year's past draft? We're going to start with another one of our favorites, Dylan Windler from the Cavs. The most recent evidence is his 19-point summer league performance. Hitting multiple shots from beyond the arc. He will fit perfectly into the modern NBA. Just fine, creating avenues and lanes for fellow youngsters on the Cavs on the perimeter, Sexton and Garland. Windler owns true shooting gravity that needs to be accounted for when he's on the floor by every defense. He will hit 3 26-footers if you don't guard him and make you pay, and then make you think about how he's going to get out there and how you're going to get out there and guard him. So Windler definitely fills that role. He's not as tall as Anderson, maybe not the defensive presence with his, Anderson's 6'10 frame, but Windler does own that same shot gravity. And I think another place to look from this past draft is Jordan Poole from the Warriors. Poole owns that iconic March Madness, 3-point shot taking down Houston with 3.6 on the clock, down 2. Poole holds big shot ability, history, and range. His game-winning 3 against Houston was from NBA range, and we know how much Golden State values shooting with Klay Thompson out for extended time. Russell not being a super knockdown shooter from 3, Poole might just find some opportunities similar to the game winner he had against Houston inside one of the most modern offenses in NBA history. And if we go back to the college game, like what is the who is the Ryan Anderson there? It might be Joey Hauser, who was formerly of Marquette, now transferred to Michigan State. 6'9", 230. He shot at 42% from deep. It seems like that might translate to the modern NBA game like really, really, really well. He might only be at Michigan State for 1 year if he comes out and has a monster year and plays really efficiently. I bet the scout team for Coach Izzo grabs a bunch of wins in practice with Hauser on the floor since he's going to redshirt this year. And I bet it'd be really fun to see him and Cassius Winston shoot the ball back and forth all year on the practice floor because both of those guys can shoot it from deep. Winston is an acclaimed 3-point shooter, and we're so glad that he's coming back for his season and is going to be one of the front runners for preseason player of the year for sure. So Hauser is that player that might be that Ryan Anderson $80 million, like scratching your head type deal because he can stretch the floor and create that space for those offensive initiators that NBA offenses are centered around. All right, let's get to a couple odds and ends, right? UConn, back in the Big East, and back in a little trouble, right? So we're so excited, from the East Coast that UConn finds its way back into the Big East. I think it's a smart move for the conference. I think it's a smart move for UConn. It makes, travel sense and economic sense for UConn to get back into the Big East. It makes traditional sense for them to get back into the Garden when they had one of the most iconic, 6 overtime games against Syracuse. I know who's no longer in the Big East, but that game was one of the defining games of Big East tournament history, and it's so nice to have one of the founding fathers of the Big East back in after going to the AAC. And then trouble, Kevin Ollie, 3-year show cause. They look like they might not have to pay him the remaining $10 million that they had on his contract due to the show cause. It seems like the restrictions that the NCAA put on UConn as a program with one lesser scholarship and a little bit of watchful eye situation, it doesn't seem like that was really that harsh. I mean, you kind of thought that maybe that Ali championship with in 2014 might be one of those things that gets taken down, but they got him for everything after that. So again, I think it goes back to, as much as Calhoun wanted Kevin Ali to be the coach afterwards, and he won that championship with a lot of Calhoun's players, the way that Ali went about business seemed a little too NBA-ish and a little too casual, and I think that's what got him in trouble there. Is Kevin Ali a good coach? Sure. Yeah, he won a national championship. You're never going to take that away from him regardless of who the players came from. Is he maybe more suited for the NBA? Maybe. That might be the situation. But so glad UConn's back. Welcome back to the Big East. We're happy. We'll welcome everybody that's a Big East fan. We'll welcome you back with open arms. Small betting note. And I'm sorry we don't have Mike Randall on the podcast to talk about this because I think he would have a definite opinion on this. For the first time ever, in May, New Jersey, our home state where we podcast from, took in more money on sports betting than Nevada did in a singular month. It was only by a couple million, but the fact that New Jersey has sports betting at such a high level right now, I think is going to speak volumes moving forward to where this economic wheelhouse goes. New Jersey was a little bit ahead of the curve because they allowed phone and computer betting as opposed to just on-site betting. And, when Mike and I, broadcast from the Meadowlands and from FanDuel Sportsbook, it was really fantastic, and we really enjoyed our time there. Both of us placed a couple bets down. A bunch of our helpers and support crew that were there with us also put a whole bunch of bets down. So it's not like that part is going to go away. But New Jersey was a little bit ahead of the legislation here, and they definitely keyed into if you can place a bet inside state lines via phone or mobile, they got it. So I think that really paid dividends. And I know that Mike with the Action Network is going to have some opinions on that. So we'll get his opinions next week. A couple other things, odds and ends. Transfer waiver adjustment. But, don't expect anything big from it. It's just more frustration from this. This is such a reactionary move by the NCAA after the initial noise of my goodness, look at the Wild West in college hoops with all the student athletes moving and transferring. And that's what this move is here. Great. Just what the sport needs. More reactionary decision-making in place of forward thinking that help protect the people and project the sport into the future. Just great. This is nothing else that's predictable. And, so that's why, Herring got, cleared at St. John's. That's the one we're always going to transfer, we're always going to reflect back upon the hardship waivers. So there's just more hoops to jump through for these hardship waivers. Are they in place so if a coach abandons ship and you can go get a restart? Yes, that part is decent, but the other hoops that they have to jump through, the student athletes do, isn't really what we're looking for as far as waiver adjustment situation. Speaking of transfers, two of note. Blackshear leaves West Virginia Tech and the ACC for Florida and the SEC. This is a huge get for Mike White and the Gators. He will fit perfectly with returning point guard Andrew Nembhard. Throw in a strong incoming class with Scotty Lewis, Trey Mann, and this Gator team looks like it might be a top 15, maybe even a top 10 team coming into the preseason. I think Blackshear really changed the profile, and he's a skilled big that can play in the pick and roll. He can do some rim running, obviously active on the defensive front, which I think Mike White will appreciate. But also, if you have somebody as creative as Andrew Nembhard running the point, he's going to find ways to get Blackshear easy scoring opportunities with his length and bounce ability. Really like this get for the Gators, and maybe we'll even try to talk to Eric Fawcett in the preseason about this exact. Another one to pay attention to is Quentin Grimes. He's off to Houston in the AAC. After an uneventful year at Kansas, after a big blowout game in the opening game, the guard with NBA size and skills is going through the previously mentioned waiver application to play immediately. Expect that to go not so well for the remainder of the season. This is huge for the Cougars. After losing everything, Amari Brooks, Galen Robinson, Corey Davis from last year's Sweet 16, 33-win team. Getting Grimes to play right away would help fill the void of losing three perimeter players who had such a successful season and successful careers as Cougars. If Houston can be a landing spot for transfers, looking for a fresh start, maybe even obtaining a Nevada-ish transfer locale inside the weaker AAC, which is now minus UConn, and it holds a currently down Wichita State team, and a Cincy team with a new head coach. Now, I know Memphis is rolling, then maybe Kelvin Sampson might be onto something here with this program. And lastly, the last thing we'll get to, is the California Fair Play Bill. Now, this is something that I hold pretty close, and I'm sure Mike will have an opinion on this as well. But this goes back to the proper method of helping solve pay the players. On the surface, this creates an unlevel playing field for all the sports in national championships. I get that part. That's simple. If California goes through with this bill, then any team from California will have an unfair advantage over other teams existing in the other 49 states. I get that. But it goes against the ancient, outdated amateurism model and the current rule. And this brings me back to one of our talking points that we talked about before on the podcast. Katie Ledecky at Stanford, who is a multiple-time Olympic swimmer and world record holder in the pool, Ledecky had to choose. She had to choose between being a teammate with her Stanford Cardinal or abandoning that, taking a contract from Speedo and other entities that existed in the swimming world and take that money, but then she was not allowed to continue being an athlete as the part of student athlete at Stanford. So the amateur rules did not allow that. So this really goes back to the thing we talked about before. Just use the Olympic model. Go back to it. Go to the Olympic model where athletes can go ahead and garner any sort of prize money, endorsement money, and still retain their status as athletes in the student-athlete framework that the NCAA should hold. Why are you removing that opportunity from a 19-year-old, from an 18-year-old, and taking away something that might be the most important thing in their life, which is their team, their teammate, and that locker room? Listeners out there that have shared time in a locker room, whether it be in high school or if you're lucky enough to do it at the Division I level in college, those relationships never go away, and that experience is binding. And it teaches you things that you can't learn in the classroom. And so those experiences were taken away from very successful people like Katie Ledecky. I like where California's going here. I'm just going to say that right now. And I think it's the right move, and I think it's going to push things in the right direction. And then the NCAA is going to drag their feet with it and eventually get to the right place. And I bet it's going to be a bunch of years from now, maybe even when we're not podcasting anymore. But that's the point. California, love the bill, think it makes sense. And listeners out there, happy 4th of July. I hope everybody has an unbelievable holiday. And look, if you're digging on what's infiltrating on your ears, give the pod a follow at Twitter at SES Podcast. Efficiency of keystrokes, of course. Don't forget to give Mike a follow over at Randall Rant. He is entertaining, intelligent, and he will get you up to date with all fantasy football things. Anything you need to know fantasy football wide, he is your zest. And final, please, enjoying that college basketball riff, discover some to share some with. Screen the Screener marauds for ears, so go grassroots. Share via voice, tell a friend, leave a kind review on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. We'll catch up with you next week, and before you know it, happy 4th of July out there, everybody. Cheers, cilantro, gratulazzi. I'm addicted to the appetite. It's a